I cannot tell you how excited I have been for this moment. We delayed this in the autumn, but I have been preparing and studying for our new series on Joseph for ages, like weeks. Several weeks, maybe at least 5 weeks or something like that. No, I'm excited about this series. I know that it's going to have a powerful impact on our lives. In fact, that's why this story was written. It was written to impact our faith in God so that we would grow in our understanding of what our God is like and what he can do in our lives as we continue to trust him, as we continue to lean in, as we continue to wait for him to show up and rescue us out of our situations and out of our trials. My hope is, and my expectation for this series is, that your faith will go up. From wherever it's at now, that your faith is going to go up. And my hope is that you will know that it is entirely safe to trust God in your pain, to trust God in your moments of disappointment, to trust God in those dark and dire situations that you may find yourself in. It's safe to trust him because he's the living God, he's the active God, and he really has proven himself to be a God who helps in those very moments. I guess before we dive in and what we're going to see in the life of Joseph here is that there is never going to be a situation in your life. There is never going to be a situation in your life where there's no hope for you. Never. That's never going to be the case. There's no disappointment that's beyond hope. And I'm not saying you're not going to feel disappointed. I'm not going to say you're not going to feel stuck. And I'm not going to say that you may find yourself in extended periods of time where it's not great and wonderful and where you have no clue what to do. But I will say that God has proven himself to be our help. A God who lifts us out of the mire and clay. A God who intervenes in our lives. There's always hope because our God is an active God. And the repeated big picture theme as you look at the book of Joseph is, he is paying attention no matter how it seems, and he can rescue you and help you. It's an amazing, powerful story. There's always wonderful hope for your future. For your future. Okay, my goals. My goals for today are two. I've got two goals. The first goal is that we can remember quickly together, and by way of just fast overview, the basic story of Joseph. I feel like this is the fastest series you've ever sat through. No, we are going to go back through it again, slowly, bit by bit, over time, but just to give us a quick overview of the story. And then the second thing is to drive home the powerful truth that this Joseph story isn't just a powerful story with powerful themes, but it is absolutely historically true. That the events actually did take place. And I want your faith in the reliability of the Word of God to go way up, and your uncertainties about, did this stuff really happen? I want that to be washed away. And we're going to spend a little bit of time on that today. But I guess you could imagine, thinking about a person like Joseph, if you're kind of aware of his story, you can imagine that the Joseph story just might very well be one of the most historically trackable of the Bible stories. If you were just based on what you know about the study of history and archaeology, you might guess that if the story of Joseph really did play out like the Bible describes it to be, and if Joseph really did have the role in Egypt in the mighty empire that he is described as having with such a powerful effect and consequences, it would seem most likely that he, of all these stories, there would be record, and there would be a lot of evidence to support that. The truth is, we have so much evidence. We have so much evidence about Joseph. We know where his palace was. We know where his burial place was in Egypt before they moved his bones to Shechem. And maybe most surprisingly to some of you, we know actually exactly what he looked like. We know his hair color. We know he had red hair. So if you had red hair, hello. glorious. We know what he looked like. We know exactly what he looked like, and I'll show you a picture later on. Okay, friends, this story that we're going to be studying is entirely true. It's entirely true, which makes it so much more powerful than a parable. Joseph really did live. He did live this story. He lived it, and God really did rise him up out of his situations to be someone who transformed the Egypt of his day. Entirely, significantly, and permanently transformed Egypt. And he saved his family. And he saved his family from starvation, and that's what God had planned. In fact, in Joseph's own words from Genesis chapter 45, we read that him saying to his brothers, God sent me ahead of you to establish you as a remnant within the land and to keep you alive by great deliverance. Therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, ruler over all the land of Egypt. That's what the Bible describes Joseph and the results are. So, okay, let's just quickly remember the story. And the Bible is the account of the Joseph story. The brief version is pain, loved, pain, more pain, unbearable, crazy disappointment, pain, and then wow. That's kind of the story in a nutshell. Joseph is born, according to the Bible, the oldest son of his father's second wife, his favorite wife by far. Actually, he had 10 half-brothers who were older than him, and his half-brothers didn't like him at all. Okay, this is, if you're new here or new to the Bible or whatever, this is just a quick recap. His 10 older brothers hated him, and he was born way up north. So you've got Egypt here, and then you've got, this is your way, yep. And then you've got Israel here, and then way up north up here is where Joseph is born. He's born in Haran, the land where his father Jacob had fled to and was for 20 years. During those 20 years, he worked for his uncle, Jacob's uncle, Joseph's great uncle, and it was I'd call it an unhealthy extended family dynamic. There was crookedness and manipulation and threats and cheating and all that kind of fun family stuff. Who doesn't love a bit of that from a controlling patriarch? So that's going on in there, and that's where Joseph is born, in that environment. And then they flee, and they come down back to the land where Abraham had lived, so that's his extended family. It's rather unhealthy, but his immediate family also turns out to be entirely, well, a not positive, happy home experience, and the women in the family are just catfighting with one another throughout the ages, and it's a not positive home experience. You've got his brothers who are hating him and all this kind of stuff. And then while they're moving back to the land, Joseph's mother dies, giving birth to his only full brother, Benjamin. But that leaves Joseph with 10 half-older brothers and this messed up family dynamic, but all alone. He doesn't have his mom to watch over him in this crazy, unhealthy household. I think I just want to say, God has great compassion for people who find themselves in those kind of life situations. For people who find themselves in families and in homes like that where it's just so unhealthy, and maybe you were raised in a place like that. God just sees, and he has such compassion. The Bible shows us that he is one who is listening to the cries and the prayers of those who are in those most hurting and horrible situations. We know God's paying attention to Joseph in this story. So that's going on, and I suppose the only consolation in Joseph's life in that family situation is his father crazy loves him, just loves him so much. And as his favorite, and that helps the family dynamic. Not at all. It loves him, and he gives him this special multicolored robe, this robe of many colors, and he's lifted up as special and unique, and so So that takes place in Genesis 37. We read this. It says, now Israel, which is Jacob's, his name has been changed to Israel at this point, his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons. Did Joseph write this? No, Joseph didn't write this, but Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age, and he made a robe of many colors for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they loved it. No. They hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. Again, wonderful family dynamics here. So that's his upbringing. His mother passing away when he's young, just painful, painful stuff. And then he starts having these dreams, if you remember. He starts having these dreams, and he starts telling his family about these dreams that he has of all these older people in his family bowing down to him, and that goes over well in the not well sort of way. And then one day he's out there. His father sent him out to check on his brothers who were out doing their work, which I'm sure was awesome to them as well. And he's walking. They see him a long ways out, and they're like, here comes that dreamer. And they take him, and they throw him in a pit. They're going to kill him, but they decide not to. Instead, they sell him to some Ishmaelites who are on their way. They get some money for him. They sell him off as a slave. They tell their father that he died, and they take his coat, and they cover with blood. They come up with a story about how he died. And there goes Joseph off, and he's sold to Potiphar, the captain of the guard in Egypt. And then he's there in Potiphar's house for a while, starts off well, but then his life comes crashing down again, and he gets some false accusations, and he ends up in prison with a life sentence. And then just all that pain, all that disappointment, his life, I think it's important to know when you're looking at great leaders like what Joseph is going to become, so often they're forged in pain. Their character, their resilience, their tenacity is forged in times of pain. And he goes through all this stuff, and he's disappointed he hasn't seen his father. His father thinks he's dead. He's just alone and in prison, but God sees him there. God sees him, and God has an incredible destiny for him. I don't know, I just keep thinking about Joseph in prison and kind of thinking about his father, right? His father, who maybe he doesn't know that his father knows that he's dead or whatever, but his father's there with a broken heart out there somewhere, and he's in prison, and there's nothing he can do about it. And he's just like, if I just had a phone call, right, a prison phone call, I could just be like, hello, it's me. I was wondering after all these years, you'd like. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Hello from the outside. At least I confess that I've tried for my notes. Okay, so a couple years in prison. And then God lifts him out, and he becomes the head of Pharaoh's household, his home, the vizier of. Now I say vizier. Would you say vizier or vizier? Vizier? We'll vote. We're not voting. Vizier is what I'm going to go with. The vizier of Egypt, which is what they had in the 12th century. They had a vizier of Egypt, and so with only Pharaoh as greater than himself, and he is appointed for the purpose of rescuing Egypt from certain devastation and ruin, and ultimately he does so much more than that. It's an incredible story, the story of Joseph. From his journey, starting with pain to triumph, to dealing with these themes of forgiving family and ultimately rescuing the family that rejected him and bringing them to a prosperous land of Goshen and all that sort of stuff. But trusting God when all hope seems lost. A God who never forgets him, even when you would look around in your life and think, God has forgotten me. But just trusting God, that God's still paying attention, that he will keep his promises to him, the things that he's told him. I also just love it that this story is undeniably true. I love it that it's powerful, it's encouraging, but it's also true. And before I dive into the archaeology behind this all, since I know you're going to probably all fact check me, and I encourage you to do that because you'll be like, wow, he does know what he's talking about. It's always good for my ego. No. before I dive, I got to remind you of the timeline issues when tracing the Bible stuff, especially when you get back before 1000 BC. Okay, so Egypt is considered the most reliable dating time, not that dating timeline, the historical chronological dating timeline of all the dates in the ancient world. So I have this little picture here. No, the one before that, or another one. No, another one. It looks like an explosion of goodness. There we go. So all the other cultures around trace their timelines to Egypt and compare them to where Egypt is at. So the other ones aren't quite as reliable, and so they just keep them lined up to Egypt's situation. But you do have, according to the next picture here, you do have periods in Egypt's history that are less certain, and they're these dark periods of time. Like here, you've got this third dark period here, and then there's a couple more. Right around 1000 BC, which is right here, there's this big dark period, and those are periods where the records aren't so great. And you kind of have to make some educated guesses on how long they lasted. The other periods of time, like the New Kingdom and Middle Kingdom and Old Kingdom, those are set, those are solid, those are the dates, but it's how long were the times in between. And what we discover, and this is the challenge with biblical archaeology, and this is one of the main things that you got to hold on to whenever you want to research the historicity of biblical events, is that this period here, flowing out of 1000 BC, this dark period is highly suspect in its length. And the reason why it's highly suspect is because you have all these other cultures. In order to match with the timeline of Egypt, you have to synthetically add gaps in their histories just to get it to stay lined up. Okay? So as a result, it's suspecting here that this might be too long of a timeline. And so some of Egypt's dates are messed up. So when you're I'm just saying that because when you're talking to archaeologists and when you're looking at the biblical realities of the Bible, the common answer that you receive from different archaeologists is that I don't see what the Bible describes in the time period that I expect it to be described in. And so what you do is you're like, okay, let's not talk about the dates. Let's talk about the facts. What is in the sand? What do you see in the sand? Don't worry about the dates in the timeline. And if you do that, you'll find incredible things about the Bible and how it lines up with how the Bible describes. In fact, the Bible timeline seems to be more reliable than this timeline. I'm just saying, follow the Bible timeline. Okay, so I'm just throwing that out there, just so we're aware, because we're going to be looking at the facts. We're going to be looking at in the sand, and what I want to discover is, by the facts, looking at archaeology, is there evidence of a genetically Semitic, which would be Jacob, Joseph, Abraham? They're all genetically Semitic. A genetically Semitic vizier, high ruler of Egypt, not of the royal family. That's what I'm looking for. In the right time period, as the Bible describes this story. Isn't that what you would want to be looking for? Yeah, that's what we're looking for. Whose life matches the story of Joseph in the Bible. And that's exactly what we find in the 12th dynasty, in Egypt's 12th dynasty. Here's a picture of Pharaoh Amenemhat. Oh, it's a little dark there. He is the Pharaoh who had the dream. He has this dream, and he calls Joseph out to interpret it. Now, he wasn't the only Pharaoh at the time. For the previous 12 years, he was the co-regent with his father. And in that 12th dynasty, what was going on there is after the senior Pharaoh got established as a capable ruler, then they would appoint their heir as the co-regent, and they would kind of take up the day-to-day tasks, and the senior Pharaoh would go into this really awesome retirement and let their heir kind of rule every day-to-day stuff. So the old Pharaoh would then live in Memphis, the old palace. Here's a map here of Egypt. In Memphis, which is not in Tennessee, it's up there. And then the other Pharaoh, the ruling Pharaoh, I guess, would be down in a place that is now covered by this village called Lisht, just south of Memphis. So that's where the power was going on in Joseph's day. So one day, Pharaoh Amenemhat III had this troubling dream, And Joseph was brought out of the great prison in Memphis, and he was brought to this new royal palace where where he was shaved his beard, and he was put in these multicolored robes that reflected his upbringing as a significant heir of a chieftain, of a Semitic tribal chieftain. And as you know, then he interprets Pharaoh's dream and gives Pharaoh some advice. And then Pharaoh appoints Joseph as in this vizier role. Okay, so while this is taking place, and he goes about saving Egypt from this famine, as you remember the Bible story, he ends up seeing his family all move down to Goshen, which is up at the top bit up there, top of Egypt. The land of Goshen is where the Bible describes him being. And we can clearly tell that that Jacob and all that whole family moved to this city called, or found, probably the Bible says, founds the city called Avaris, which is right there, up at the top, up in the land of Goshen. So Jacob moves there, and his family moves there, and ultimately becomes one of the largest cities in the world at that time. I'm going to save a lot of the information about Avaris for another day because there's a lot there, but what I will say is that Avaris was inhabited after this moment here by a thriving, booming population of non-genetically Egyptian Semites, like Joseph's family, who were shepherds, #Bible, and who one day, after a couple hundred years, will completely abandon the city all at once, like in one night, leaving so much behind and no explanation. Cough, cough, Exodus, cough, cough. So it's a pretty remarkable stuff, but I'll say it. Here's a picture of the excavation going on. It's been going on in Avaris for a while. This is going on by Manfred Bietek, one of the greatest archaeologists of our time. And he's been studying this city where Jacob's family, or Joseph's father and family, settle into, and probably founded it. All right, so we're more familiar with the city of Avaris by a different name. You're more familiar with it in the Bible under its future name called Ramses. Ultimately, the name of Avaris is called Ramses, and that's just because in the next picture here, after Avaris was abandoned suddenly in one night with a multi-hundred-year gap following where it was completely abandoned, they ultimately then built the city of Ramses over the top of it later, and so the Bible refers to it as its name later. Now, the interesting thing about Avaris is that at the center, the founding house is entirely not Egyptian in structure. It's a Syrian house. It's a Syrian house, like from the land where Joseph's father Jacob lived for 20 years in his happy, hostile family up in the land of Haran. It looks like this. This is looking at the ruins and the reconstruction here. It doesn't look like that. It looks like there we go. It's uniquely Syrian and not Egyptian at all. And you look at it and you're like, wow, this is the founding house of this city in Egypt. Well, it looks like it's from an entirely different place. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of house that Jacob would have lived in for 20 years when he was up north with Laban. I hope you enjoy a little bit of the archaeology. We're going to be getting to the Bible in a little bit, but I love it when what we read in the Bible exactly lines up with what's in the dirt. I just love that stuff. I love that stuff. Okay, so as the story goes, Jacob dies 17 years after moving here and after living in this house, after the founding of Avaris, and then his house is flattened, just like it would have been back then, according to the ancient custom. When the master of the house dies, then the house is flattened. And then on top of this site, and on top of this house, an Egyptian palace is constructed. An Egyptian palace is built, and so what happens is this. For 20 years, Joseph serves Amenemhat III until his death. And then Amenemhat's daughter, Neferusabek, reigned as queen, and Joseph is allowed to keep all of his titles, and they build a palace for him here in Avaris, where he can retire and just live out the rest of his days. That's a picture of the palace, the ruins there. That's the ruins of the palace there. Now you're thinking to yourself, okay, Brian, okay, this is convenient, right? This is one of those things where Okay, I am a natural-born skeptic, which I'm sorry, that must be a terrible life. But you know, how do you know that this is Joseph's palace? And okay, it's the facts. It's the facts, and I'm just going to keep going through them. The facts show us this palace had these courtyards and colonnades and audience chambers and a robing room. Obvious someone who was a mighty, mighty royal official, very, very, very important to the state, built in classic Egyptian architecture, but the occupant was definitely not Egyptian and was definitely Joseph. But we'll keep going there. When someone gets a palace built for them, it means they're being honored for what they've done, okay? Like saving the nation from certain destruction and completely turning the power structures around or something like that, for instance, the Joseph story. But there's more here. In the garden in the back, there are 12 graves and 12 memorial chapels. Let's go ahead to the next picture here. This is the garden in the back. So you can see starting up at these, follow the white lines, right? There's 12 graves, 12 memorial chapels here. How many sons did Jacob have again? 12? Oh man, that is just so shocking. I did not see that coming. You've got these 12 pillars all throughout, themes all through the palace here. You have obviously non-Egyptian graves here. Now, one of the graves here is entirely unique and significant because it was a pyramid tomb. You can see it down here on the bottom left here. The next slide shows the actual a bit more close up. You have this pyramid grave. Now, this is significant. Only pharaohs and queens. Only pharaohs and queens had pyramid tombs at this time. Let's say it one more time. Only pharaohs and queens had pyramid tombs at this time. And yet this person buried in this tomb is not a king, is not Egyptian. He is genetically Semitic. He's Joseph. But he's honored with this king burial, like hero of the nation. And inside, let's see. What else do I want to say? One of the incredible things about this thing is inside there's this statue, this huge statue, right? It's like twice the size of normal as you go in and you see this thing here. You ask yourself, is it unusual to have a statue in a memorial tomb? No, it's not. It's not unusual. But to find one so huge is entirely unusual. It's telling you're looking at a very, very, very important person. And when you're looking at the pieces of the statue, you can just see the hairstyle. You can see the hair color is red. You can see his weapon. You can see the color of his skin is yellow. It's Palestinian. It's Syrian. You know that that's his descent from there. You can see that he's wearing a unique robe of office, something that Egyptians didn't wear. He is wearing a multicolored coat. You might say a coat of many colors in this statue. Okay, it's so intricately done. It's like, and this is unique. You don't see anything ever like this. All right, I don't want to say it's Joseph, but I'm just leaning that way, Joseph. And so, even more uniquely about this is that the statue is made of the highest craftsmanship by royal decree in the royal workshops. Okay, this is the highest of quality by people who had seen this person. This statue is made by people who had seen him and knew what he looked like at the highest quality level, okay? Okay, just so we're clear here. What we have in Avaris is built at the right time, in the right era, a very, very highly respected, non-Egyptian, Semitically genetic ruler, honored with king's burial, robed in an unusual coat of many colors. Oh, man. That's what Joseph looks like. That's what it looks like. Isn't that crazy? You're like, are you kidding me? And if you're still skeptical, I'm sure that there's something about prayer ministry for you coming up. But there has never been discovered anything like this in the whole of Egyptian history. There has never been discovered anything like this in the whole of Egyptian history. Joseph's pyramid tomb is entirely unique and special. He was the hero of the nation. The things that he accomplished as vizier of Egypt saved, transformed, radically altered his whole time. He is exalted in Egyptian history as unique and amazing. Now, I'm just saying all this stuff. It shouldn't surprise you. It shouldn't surprise you if Joseph really did what the Bible describes him as doing. It shouldn't it shouldn't surprise you that we would find evidence, that we would know a lot about such a significant person in Egypt's history, especially in a period of time we know a lot about. Now, I've not told you everything. In fact, I'm intentionally not telling you a lot of things because at different moments as we go through the study, I'm saving them. But I've said just enough to get us started. Just enough to get us started in our study facing the right direction. Next week, we're going to dive into the Bible, and we're going to look at these powerful biblical themes. But I just want to start here. It's true. It's true. That's where I want to start. The story that we are about to unpack, the themes that we're about to look at, it's true. And I want you to know that our God really is like this. We're going to read some incredible things about our God. And I just want you to know our God really is like the Bible, or like the Bible describes him to be, like what we're going to unpack. And to me, that's incredible. It's incredible good news. The thing that impresses me with Joseph and his story is his resilience and his tenacity and how he navigates pain and forgiveness and how he keeps going. I don't know how you're going to be responding to this throughout the next several weeks. Some of you today, though, for some of you today, you're here to just believe again. That's what you're here for about. Just to believe again. You've been skeptical, you've been apathetic maybe. I don't care if it happened or not or whatever. And especially when it comes to those old stories in the Bible. But today it's about believing again for you. And I just challenge you. I challenge you again to hear, to believe, to be like, okay, I'm going to push aside and I'm going to believe. I'm going to push aside this skepticism that's been invading my mind, and I'm just going to be like, okay, the facts are there. I'm going to believe. I'm going to believe. And I hope you can do that because the God of the Joseph story is amazing. I think you're going to find he's exactly the kind of God you want him to be to you. I'm glad that this is what he's like. For some of you, today is about believing. For some of you, it's about hoping again. It's about hoping again. You've lost hope. You've lost some hope. You're not where you want to be in life right now. You feel stuck. You feel that darkness and hopeless caving in, and you can't figure out how to get unstuck. You can't figure out how to, and the message for you is God rescues stuck people, whether they can see a way out or not. Like Joseph, those who keep trusting him. So the message for you is keep trusting, keep hoping, hold on to hope, because God really does see you. He sees you. He sees you, and he rescues. I just want to say one last thing about Joseph's tomb. Here's a picture of the drawing of a side view of his tomb here. You can see letter E, that's the pyramid over the top. Letter B down below is the foundation of the pyramid. C is the chamber where the Joseph statue was. And then A, down below, is this mud-bricked, domed chamber where they placed his mummified body. Now, the thing about the burial chamber is this. The grave is empty. The grave is empty just like the Bible tells us it is. Grave robbers, they don't steal the bodies. They're worthless. They take all the other stuff. They don't. But the Bible tells us that Moses takes Joseph's bones out of this place. And then ultimately Joshua buries him in Shechem, way up in the land. But you look at the Joseph story, you see this tomb, and you look at the evidence, and you say, the grave is empty, just like the Bible describes it to be. And the same is true of Jesus. The same is true of Jesus. He died while he was professionally executed by Roman soldiers on a Roman cross, and his body also was placed in a tomb. But on the third day, God raised Jesus from the dead, and his grave is empty. For some of you, today is about Jesus. Some of you today is about Jesus, and you've asked yourself, is it really true? Is this story that I see in the Bible, the Bible says that Jesus is alive, raised from the dead, that the grave is empty. Can I trust that? Can I trust this book? Can I trust this story? And to you I say, it is true. It is true. It's true, and I believe it's time for you to make your decision. I believe it's time for you to make your decision and give your life to Jesus, to dedicate your life to the God of the Bible, to be rescued and saved. Today, in a moment, we're going to give you an opportunity to give your life to Jesus, and I urge you to take that opportunity in just a few moments. I've got one challenge for you this week. One. It's an easy week because it's snow. That's why. Challenge number one is just refresh yourself, remind yourself this Joseph story. Just go through the last bit of Genesis and just kind of skim through it. Just kind of, just kind of remember what's in there, kind of remember what we're going to be talking about, and just get mentally ready for the messages that God's going to be speaking to us about as we look closely at the life of Joseph.
Hello, and thank you for watching our service here at Rehope. My name's Adam, and I'm on the pastoral care team. So, every Sunday, we invite people in the congregation to come up and receive some prayer ministry, and we want to actually extend that offer out to you guys who are watching. So, if you ever want to come and receive prayer ministry from us, just send us an email. If you get in touch with Hannah, who is our pastoral admin, her email address is hannah@rehope.co.uk. Okay, thank you very much, and God bless.